Volkswagen's Transporter is claimed to be the world's most successful commercial vehicle. After all, it's been going for some 40 years now, and in that time they've built 6.7 million examples. Started life as a microbus version of the familiar old Beetle with a flat-four air-cooled engine in the back. Since then, the range has blossomed into vans, pickup trucks, people carriers, diesel and four-wheel drive versions, as well as the motor caravans. But now, VW have decided that it's time for a radical change in the concept of the vehicle and hence its mechanical layout. Well, here it is, the new Transporter and Caravelle range, and it's radically different. They've taken the engine from the back, put it up here at the front, driving the front wheels. Now, of course, that means the driving position is much further back than the old Transporter with the Ultimate in forward control. You're sitting behind the front wheels. But you haven't lost as much space as you would have done in, say, a Renault Espace or a Nissan Prairie, because they put the engine in transversely, and they've done a very good job of packaging it at the front here. Of course, that has had an effect on the interior. So let's see just how much difference it's made. Well, the answer is not a great deal. All three rows of seats have moved back in the body, and that means the rear seat here is much closer to the back door than the old Transporter, but the load space is deeper because you don't have an engine underneath. All five of the passengers in the rear have an armrest. The seats are very comfortable. They've changed the design of this centre module, and it folds down to a coffee table if you're treating it as an executive limousine. The seat itself slots out easily and stows in the back if you want more luggage space, and these seats come out with the removal of 4 bolts. But it's not as flexible as the Renault Espace system, where you can position any seat where you want it in the interior of the vehicle. You can still walk through to the front though. As you pull away, you're immediately aware that this is a much more conventional petrol engine than the old Transporter. They're derived from the Audi range, 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol, 2.5-litre 5-cylinder petrol, and a 5-cylinder diesel. But they've been detuned to suit the Transporter. They deliver their power low down in the mid-range, and they slog away really well. With the weight of the new engines right up front in the nose, the Transporter is much more stable than the old version, especially at speed on motorways when in a crosswind you could find yourself occupying 2 lanes. As you'd expect, the ride in the driving compartment is also much better because you're sitting behind the axle. In the old Transporter, you felt every bump you went over. On the old Transporter, you could slide open the centre windows. Now, on this one, they're fixed. They've given you an extra fan to ventilate the passenger compartment, but certainly my occupants in the back complained of feeling stuffy on long journeys. As you'd expect, the gear change is a great improvement on the old Transporter, where you had a sort of wand that felt as though you were stirring porridge. Now, like all Volkswagens, the new Transporter is very competent, but it does look a bit like a Ford Transit. You have to ask if they've sacrificed some of their individuality. It is a very conventional vehicle. That's certainly not a charge you could see levelled against this vehicle, the new Toyota Previa. It's like a giant egg on wheels, something you'd expect to find on a designer's doodle pad, but they've gone ahead and made it. It's a big vehicle. It's in the same class as the Volkswagen Transporter, and it's quite a lot bigger than Renault's Espace. Inside, the styling is just as unconventional, very space-age looking, deep scallops in front of the driver and passenger, and this very prominent centre binnacle bringing the radio and heater controls within easy reach. Lots of stowage space both in the front and the back of the vehicle. Previa's a full 8-seater compared to the Transporter, although this extra seat does rather restrict access to the interior of the vehicle, but you can push the middle row forward and then all occupants have plenty of leg and head room. And an aspect of the sheer length of the vehicle, there's plenty of luggage space, even with 3 rows of seats. Now, if you need more luggage space, this rear row folds up very neatly against the side of the vehicle. This one does the same, and then you've got an enormous amount of storage area. What you mustn't do when you put it down again is what I did and pull the release. The back flies up and smacks you in the face. Now, the remarkable design of Previa is continued in the mechanical layout. They put the engine between the front seats, but they've laid it on its side, so you really wouldn't know it was there. As you'd expect, with an engine in this position, access is pretty disastrous, a mechanic's nightmare through a tiny little hatch. But it's only intended for reaching the dipstick and refilling the sump after an oil change. All the routine maintenance of checking the levels, including topping up the engine oil reservoir, is done under the bonnet. And that's where you'll find the battery and air filter, but also the alternator and the power steering pump. They're driven by a jack shaft running forward from the engine itself. The old Toyota Space Cruiser had a reputation for excessive understeer and instability under braking. Well, thanks to its mid-engine design, the new Previa has none of those problems. Handling is very safe and secure, although the ride does tend to float a bit over bumps. Braking is now very powerful, but it's a nonsense the UK importers of the Previa have decided not to offer anti-lock brakes even as an option when you can get alloy wheels and a silly spoiler on the rear tailgate. Performance is good thanks to tall gearing and the slippery shape. It does over 112 miles an hour, and 0 to 60 in 11.3 certainly won't leave you at the traffic lights. The gear change, though, is controlled by cables. That's enough to send any former Maxi owner screaming off into the woods. It's a lot better than the dreadful change in the old VW Transporter, but it's certainly not as good as the best Japanese changes. Despite its size and weight, the Previa is an easy vehicle to drive. It feels like a car on the road, the steering is light, and the turning circle isn't at all bad. And in this high driving position, you get a good view of the road. They've certainly cracked the ventilation problem. 3 of the windows in the back are able to hinge open, and the heating and ventilation at the front here is very effective. At £18,000, the Previa is actually very good value for money when you stack it up against the opposition. It's got the extra seating capacity over Renault's Espace, and it's also got luggage carrying capacity as well. With this extraordinary shape, it's got tremendous eye appeal. It's much more of a car than just a van with seats inside.
Well, bearing in mind that governments, indeed everyone's concerned about fuel economy, these vehicles do look a bit daft if they spend most of their time with just the driver on board. It's only if they regularly carry 6 or 7 people that the economics begin to look reasonable. Now, another major government concern, of course, is the control of vehicle pollution. And recently they made a tentative step towards cleaner exhausts by proposing a new check to be included in the MOT test. Here's Sue Baker.
In 1960, when Ernie Marples introduced the 10-year test, it covered only brakes, lights and steering, and it